Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. All right, so this is part 2 of the migrating my VB project into springboot, react, vite, javascript and java for the background. Yeah, so I think I forgot to mention that during the installation, in creating the dependencies, that I forgot to mention that I am actually using Java 17. So when you do Command Shift and P on VS Code and you choose Spring Initializer, and then you've got all your dependencies, you've added all your dependencies. Once you go to the next section, babe, you click on continue to go to the next section, babe, it will ask you what language you want to use, what version of the Java language you want to use, and I chose 17 because 11 is gone, 8 definitely gone. The latest version as far as I know is like 22, 24. I think it's 24, right? And everybody is on 17 by now, so 17 will work with everything that I have. So you can see all the dependencies here, right? So I did mention that I am using Postgres database. I've created a database here, OTCDB, in Postgres. So if you install Postgres as well, if you go to Google, you'll be able to install it, and it's a very easy, simple database to install. And once you've got it installed, you create your database, and your entity JPA will manage all the data table for you. I think the only thing you need is the database. Do you need the table? It will create a table for you. If you get a message, I think I did get messages, isn't it, from the beginning, you would have to create the first table that needs to be there. Otherwise the rest should be manageable. So just this video, I want to talk about the background and what I've got here. Like I said, my video is not a tutorial, but it's just to share what I have already have. So in VS Code, or when you do create your Spring Boot project, you will get an application that has the static public static main method, which means that you can use it to run your application basically. So this is the main point where I run the application, and when I run the application, I've set it up so that in the user table we create a quick user, because it's one of the things that needs to be there in order for everything to work. Otherwise I have to use my postman to always create the user. Like for example, I've got post a user here, like I have to create the user. I have to, but this bit here, make sure that we add a row, and in that row we then create a user for that particular row. So we add a row here at the top here where we are using the repository. Now I don't want to go into this too deeply, but this is what I do when the application is started at the beginning, right? And it comes up with under resources, you get application.properties, and this is where you set up all your database details. Now some of these stuff that I set it up, I didn't like. I started off using H2, but I wanted something, a database that you can actually see what you are doing and stuff. It gave me a lot of problems, so I got off it. I've set my server port at 800 because 8080 is too common. Everybody, like most of the stuff you install locally, it uses port 8080, so I didn't want to use that. And I've got my data source URL. As you can see, I've got JDBC, Postgres, SQL, and then I've got localhost 5433. For me it's 54335. I think for most of you it will be 5432. And then I've got the database right here, right? And I got question mark, and I've got user is equals to Postgres. That is the user I'm using, and the password is password. Sorry, and the password is my password 1234. So this is the kind of thing you want to set up. It's very basic. I like showing my SQL when I enter the SQL. When I install stuff, I want the SQL to show. Now the error you are seeing here is just connecting to the rabbit MQ. So that's the error you are seeing here. So nothing much apart from that. Everything seems to be on track. I've got Elasticsearch, but you don't need to worry about that for now. So I mean, the main thing right now is that SQL is set to true. Show SQL is set to true, and then we want to use this Hibernate, Spring JP Hibernate, and this is how you will handle the creation of the tables and dropping the tables and stuff like that. And at the moment, I've got it as create. Obviously, when your project gets to production, you don't want to use create. You want to use update. Yeah, but I'm using the create as my strategy. And that means that every time the server is restarted, the data is deleted and the tables are recreated and everything. So if I want to run my project, I usually click on the project here, and then I go to run Java, and then it runs. So you can see my project being run here. And if I want to run my front end, I hop into my front end folder, because I've got a back end folder and a front end folder. And then what I do, I say npm run dev, and that will get that server started for the front end. Right, so I mean, that's the back end. In the back end, I have a folder for configuration, a folder for this is consumer is to do with RabbitMQ. I've got folder for the main folders that you need to focus on is configuration, controllers, modules, publisher, repository, and services. Those are the folders that you need to worry about in terms of the backend. And the configuration folder, I have a security folder, and this is where we manage all the security for the project. You can see how I'm managing password encoder. You encode the password so that you can see the letters or the characters as you encode the password as they create their password. And this is how you allow the pages in. At the moment, I'm kind of like allowing everything for now, because I'm not going into I haven't gone into the off yet at the front end, but I've allowed these lot in because this is how these are all the endpoints that I'm using right now, and that's how I've, otherwise you can't access it and send API calls into it. We are using JWT of authentication. You can see how I've set up the converter here, JWT decoder, and all sorts of stuff that we can use when we want to authenticate the user. So once the user log in, it creates a JWT code token, and this is how it is managed in the front in the security section. If I was to start at the bottom, so basically every endpoint, let me go into the control. Every endpoint that you create, for example, needs to be under the controller. So every endpoint needs to be under a controller. So you can they've done it to separate the work so that things are handled in different places and managed well and maintained in different places. So the controller is used to basically connect to the client. The client makes calls, and they make calls through the controller. Once they make calls to the controller, for example, then the messages are sent. So this controller here, when I register a user with this endpoint /user, it's using a class which has the body, and basically it is passing that body on to the service, which is basically the business logic, which handles the business logic. So things are separated in that way to make things work and manage in that way, so that it's not mess up in everywhere you go. In the modules is basically my entities and the DTO. So the DTO is basically how I used to store the data. It makes it easier for you to send the data from the front end to the back end. You can exclude some of the stuff without entering all the data now. And then as you develop and add your work into it, then you want to bring all these stuff in and then add more stuff in until it gets to. So you can just focus on the ones that you need. For example, in for my user table, I'm using registry for